female teachers in my country, Chile. I'm Alicia Nunez Zamora. I'm a speech language therapist. I'm from Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, but this investigation is a collaborative work with my colleagues from Universidad del Desarrollo. Our contents in this presentation, we will review first the principles vocal problems in female teachers. Second, we will talk about vocal load and the principles aspects for what is important to study this concept in our clinical research. Then the methodology and results for our investigation. Then the repercussions in the vocal approach and the clinical approach of this population. And last but not least, my team presentation and contacts, of course. Well, let's review some general central aspect of vocal problems in female teachers, some kind of state of art regarding the main problem of this population. First of all, the relevance of the study. First, we have several studies now that indicates that the professional impact that dysphonia is in this population. Actually, it's been discussing and has a professional impact in this population. Second, it's a public health and economy matters because many studies talk about the expensive care about billions of dollars spent in medical and social care costs associated with dysphonia and these problems. Other and very recent studies indicates that dysphonia in teachers impacts in children's spoken language processing. So this is not a matter of professional impact, public health and economy, also in linguistic and language processing in children, so in education. And finally, in my country, Chile, the reality is almost the 80% of teachers are female. So this is the relevance that why our research is focused on just women. Let's talk about vocal demand and voice quality demands. Okay, teachers are voice occupational users who have high vocal demand and often must use it loud. The environmental noise in classroom is very high. And voice disorders are usually occurs because the exposure of this environmental noise, which increase the loading, and then, of course, the exposure of organs in vocal organs when speaking in unfavorable conditions, like the classroom, like many numbers of students per classroom. So this is a quote from a study. Then say that females have a greater amount of exposure of vocal vibration when speaking than men, which may increase in the presence of background noise. That is the center of our research problem because women are more fundamental pitch. So in this case, it's a risk factor that we like to approach. The mean fundamental frequency on these women are 200 hertz. So if we take this number and take to the 6 hours in classroom per day for connection time, there is also 700,000 vocal vibration per day. That is increased risk factor in exponential manners. And that's increased the impact stress and greater exposure of longitudinal lesion that is the primary risk factor, for vocal pathologies. Other risk factors involved that actually we consider in our research is first the environmental noise that is conditioned by other factors, number of students per class, ergonomic condition of classrooms, the number of students per room. In Chile, we have classroom with approximately 25 to 34, 45 students per classroom, okay? And the level at which class are taught. For example, preschool, elementary, or secondary level is not the same for a teacher and the impact in his vocal problems. Well, now we approach to the concept of vocal load and its application in our research. The approach to the concept of vocal dose and its measures. First, vocal dose is a kind of quantified the vocal. Vocal dose is a kind of quantified the vocal load, and its evaluation is made by dosimetry. Dosimetry is kind of this device that we research in the next slide. What are the parameters that we take from vocal dose? First is the fundamental frequency, and then intensity. These two parameters with environmental noise that we take from sonometer meter level allows to obtain that vocal dose and let us quantify the vocal load of teachers. What are the research applications for this? Taking of measurement, the vocal dose is very easy to measure parameters, and it's very common parameters in the clinic research actually. And now is our primary research application is that these parameters and the calculation of vocal dose permit obtain the real vocal load in different scenarios, not just the clinical aspects in female teachers. For this, we use the technology at the clinical service, and now we use the voice dosimetry, that is a portable device. It's very to use instrument, has an autonomy of almost 12 hours, and for our research, we use VoxLog 3.1 models. It consists in accelerometer to be attached to the neck, a microphone and a portable unit that store the vocal data. And the primary benefit to use voice dosimetry and is allowed to evaluate female teachers in many aspects and contexts and scenarios, obtain the real vocal dose from this population. Well, let's review the research methodology and results. Our research has a primary outcome to establish a comparison between the vocal load assessment in same group of teachers in two different evaluation contexts. First is the clinical and then the work context. The secondary outcome relates the primary variable to the level at which classes are taught and number of students per classroom. Our design is comparative, observational, cross-sectional study. The procedure is two evaluation space, clinical and work. Our participants are 26 female teachers, aged 24 to 58, from Chile. And our instruments are a questionnaire, a dosimeter voice, and sound level meter. The procedure actually is obtain a vocal load parameters during 1 hour of lecture using the vocal dose dosimeter. And then in another space, we evaluate female teachers in our simulation clinical evaluation. That is refers to the clinic and the consult in normal use. In both scenarios, we use a vocal dosimetry and sound level meter to obtain vocal parameters like fundamental frequency, intensity, and environmental noise. This data is collected and consequent analysis in SPSS program. For statistical analysis, we use for descriptive statistics, frequencies and percentage, measure of central tendency. By varied analysis, repeated tests for symmetrical data and Wilcoxon test for asymmetrical data. And for the comparative analysis, we use ANOVA test for symmetrical data and Kruskal-Wallis for asymmetrical data. And of course, our regards of ethical aspects, this study was approved by the Scientific Ethics Committee of the Faculty of Medicina, Clínica Alemana, Universidad del Desarrollo, approved number PH02 2017, and its respective informed consent. Let's see some results. From a total of 26 female teachers, in average experience to 18 years, we have 58% of teachers have an educational level of preschool, and 38% do his class in elementary school level. And 4% has both of this level, actually his class. In kind of number studies, 68% of teachers has classrooms actually between 26 and 35 students. 23% of teachers has 16 to 25 students per classroom, and 12% has more than 36 students per classroom. Let's see the results comparative with the vocal load evaluation in classroom and in the clinical simulation. If you see, the median of fundamental frequency is 277 hertz. That is actually above the norm in the evaluation in classroom. Intensity and environmental noise are high too, with 92 decibels and 71. In the evaluation in clinical simulation, we have 239 hertz. That is in the norm, actually. So in the clinical, these aspects are normal or normal vocal parameters, but in the classroom, we see a difference that is improved. Intensity actually is 10 decibels below the vocal load evaluation in classroom, also the environmental noise. And actually, in the vocal load evaluation in classroom, we have maximums of 320 hertz from teachers, and intensity, vocal intensity from 100 decibels. Another aspects of the results are the relationship with the educational level and the vocal load factors in classroom. The average fundamental frequency is higher in elementary educational level, and the intensity too, with 288 hertz and 95 decibels. Finally, another comparative research is the number of students per classroom in the relationship with vocal load factor in classroom. In this course, increase the number of students per classroom is increase the average from fundamental frequency and intensity and environmental noise. These two final aspects are p-value significant, so it's a relationship that we can approve in our research. Let's talk about the repercussions in the therapeutics and vocal approach of these findings. First, we see significant difference in all parameters evaluated. First of all, fundamental frequency is in the evaluation in the classroom is above the norm. So this leads to a biomechanical change that increases tension and stiffness and is a risk factor for vocal pathologies. This is important because female teachers are exposed to major factor risks, for example, for pathologies, vocal pathologies, and occupational dysphonia. Then the intensity actually is also significant difference in all parameters. The literature says that the lack of intensity control strategy is the first matter that affects this parameter. But also in our research, also in the evidence, we see the association with the level of intensity produced by female teachers and the number of students per classroom. This result is concordant with our research because greater the number of students per classroom, greater the intensity that the female teachers use. And actually, this is also has a greater impact, according to the literature, in preschool. This aspect is not concordant with our research because in our research, teachers of preschool doesn't have the higher intensity. Just, for example, the elementary school teachers. That is also considered in our country, Chile, because in our country, female professors of preschool has assistants in classrooms, so they are not alone with all the students. They have support for kids and a classroom lecture day. And last, the environmental noise actually has a relation with intensity and frequency radio. And is this a factor not objectified in the vocal clinic? Actually, our research uses a sound level meter, but it's not the common in clinical and speech language therapies, for example. So this is the major risk factor for vocal pathologies because to a lumbar effect. And studies say that women tend to raise their fundamental frequency to 338 hertz average when reach vocal tasks at 85 decibels. So this increased subglottal pressure and longitudinal tension underlying this phonatory task. And this is the primary risk factor for this population. So it becomes essential to consider the workspace as the environmental where the most reliable occupational voice user data is obtained, not the clinical. This is an aspect, of course, very important, but it's the workplace, the space that is most reliable occupational voice user data. And this consideration is not only critical at the time of evaluation, but it's also fundamental for the intervention and the vocal approach pathologists, focusing on an ecological view, holistic view, that includes not only vocal parameters, but also medical aspects, environmental factors, reduction of risk factor, among others. So the approach of vocal pathology is in two hands: the direct method that includes diagnosis, rehabilitation, vocal training program, and medical care, of course, but also indirect method such as intervention in space of work, behavioral change, education, and counseling. Well, now finally, but last but not least, I would like to present my team. First is Fabiola Marin, PhD candidate for public health and head of the research unit of the speech and language therapist career of Universidad del Desarrollo. And there is her contact for any information. Patricia Orellana, a speech language therapist, director of master program of vocal intervention strategies, and also from Universidad del Desarrollo. And me, Alicia Nunez, I'm academic and member of the teaching unit of health science department de la Universidad Católica de Chile, and this is my content. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to present our research, and happy to listen to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Alicia, for an excellent presentation. Are there any questions for Dr. Alicia?